everybody, it's Dan.
And this is Ron.
And this is a nominee.
Welcome, everyone.
Episode 32, I believe.
33.
33, okay.
And the second one with our exciting new technology. We're now entering the 20th century. Mm-hmm. We've each got an actual microphone.
Yeah, and we watched the movie tonight on a big spinny disc.
With lasers.
Lots of 2 lasers in that machine, at least.
Next we'll be using phasers.
Yeah.
That'll be 23rd century, I think.
So tonight we watched or at least what used to be a very rare movie, or at least in the United States, it's a pretty hard movie to get a hold of, apparently. When we were looking it up later, or at least, did you find like a DVD release of it from pretty recently? Is that what you were showing me on the phone?
Yeah, there was a DVD release, United States and Canada, but it looked like it was actually a what did you call it? Press to
like a print on demand.
Yeah.
So like they put it on so there's 2 ways that you make DVDs, right? Like there's one where you burn the video data into the disc with a laser, which is like what your computer does when you burn a DVD. Uh-huh. And then there's a process where it literally stamps it, kind of like a record.
Okay.
And so higher quality discs tend to be stamped. Like you have less issues with the disc deteriorating or whatever over time, or like skips or issues with the machine reading them. So when a company wants to put out their back catalog or parts of their back catalog that they don't have any, they want to keep it in print to protect their copyright, but they don't want to put a lot of money or effort into it because they're not going to get any money back out of it. They'll put out something like a print on demand, which is for those of you who heard our Lishtomania episode, we were watching that on Ron's print on demand copy of Lishtomania.
I actually own the movie after years of not realizing that I didn't actually own it. I own the CD of the not audio track, the music.
Right. And
so this is all, it's not like it's pirated or illegal in any way. These are officially sanctioned.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, you're buying it directly from, like, Warner Brothers does this a lot. Like, usually when you see print-on-demand movies, when you're out and about buying, like, used crap, it's always going to say Warner Archive on it. Very frequently, the disc and or the spine is going to have kind of a purple and white tint to it, although that changes sometimes. It'll say Warner Archive on it. When you take the disc out of the case, sometimes it'll have printed artwork on it, sometimes it won't, but the back of it's going to look kind of bluish instead of silver.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Usually anytime you can tell it's a pressed disc because it's going to have that like classic silver CD DVD look to the back of it.
All right, so now I got to go back and check my my copy of Lithomania and see what color it is.
Yeah, and this seemed well, I checked it when I put it into the machine. It's blue. Yeah,
it is. Okay.
Yeah,
okay,
it's like a dark blue.
Neat, I guess.
Yeah, I mean that's how.
Well, that's just one way of distributing
works,
movies,
I guess. Yeah. And apparently this movie. So we watched Missing by Costa-Gavras,
starring Jack Lemmon and Sissy Spacek.
Yeah, from 1982, and it's an intense political drama about the coup in Chile, which has become. I think people have been focusing on that a lot more in the last couple of years than they have in the last like 35 years. Or at least I remember when I first heard about it was sort of like, whoa, they didn't tell us anything about this in school. Nobody I knew was talking about any of this stuff. I think with the internet, like it becomes easier to share information like that widely. But yeah, so anyway, so the coup happens in Chile in 73. And actually that makes sense, yeah, because it has to be Chile, because we were trying to figure out what country the movie was even in for a lot of it. And
it makes it clear at the very end what movie it is.
Because the coup happened on September 11th, and they say that he was shot on September 16th.
Okay.
So it makes sense. And then the whole stadium thing, like that's the whole like mass murder in the stadium. That's probably the most famous part of the Pinochet.
People rounded up.
story, yeah.
From all over and put in the stadium. Well, so it looked like some of the people were shot or interrogated and then shot. But then there were also a lot of people that were just sitting in the stadium waiting. But were they all eventually shot too, or some of them released, or do you know what happened to them?
I believe a lot of them were shot. A lot of them were tortured. You have to remember that whenever like a military coup or just sort of like sudden eruption of violence happens like this in a country, and you have like the militaries running amok, a lot of what the rank and file military tend to be concerned with are not tactical objectives, I guess you could say. So I'm sure a lot of people were probably rounded up and put into the stadium just because somebody didn't like their face.
Oh yeah. I'm sure there are lots of innocent people
for the sake of like torturing them. A lot of and
exerting power.
Yeah, and like the great movie about that, about torture and exerting power and all that stuff is of course Salo, which I don't think we're ever probably going to cover on this podcast. I might have to get a guest host for Ron.
You don't think I could handle it?
I don't know. I don't know if I could sit through that whole movie again. I mean, did you ever see that?
No.
You know what I'm talking about, though,
What's
right?
it called again?
Salo or 120 Days in Saddam.
No.
Oh, okay.
Well, wait, why don't we hold off on that and
Okay.
actually describe this movie in a little bit? And also, so we put a notch on that. We want to talk about Salo.
Yeah, Salo, we should probably talk about Salo a little bit.
Okay. And I also want to say something about you're saying them not teaching us about this in school and stuff. So that's two things I want to get back to.
Okay, cool.
All right. I know it would be organic to continue from these two things right now, but we should just mention briefly.
Yeah.
So it's oh, wow, I talked really loud there. You can see. Or close to the microphone. Still getting used to this microphone and seeing the waveform on the computer so we can see what the sound is like. But anyways,
I'm like staring at my turned off TV.
Yeah.
And just the way I'm holding this microphone, I feel like I'm taking questions from all two of you right now.
So Dan, tell me, what is this movie about?
So the movie is about, the coup happens in Chile on September 11th, 1973. That's not mentioned in the movie, but this American couple that's living in Santiago, Chile at the time, we open the film. We're kind of following them around in their life post-coup. The military's running around. There's multiple shots of just like military members in jeeps shooting off automatic weapons randomly into crowds or just wherever down the street. It's pretty nightmarish. The couple, they're both trying to figure out how to leave the country. The husband is a little more, the husband Charles is a bit more reluctant to leave the country because he's like, yo, all my stuff's here. And Sissy Spacek is like, no, you fucking idiot, let's get out of here. But then they don't.
And then he's abducted.
And then, she comes back to their house or apartment, and it's ransacked, and nobody knows where he is.
She starts going around questioning and going to the consulate and the embassy, and eventually her father-in-law, the journalist Charles. His dad comes down. Yeah. That's Jack Lemmon, and also starts going to search for him. And we see that actually the relationship between him. He doesn't know his son very well. We see, and there was a strained relationship between them, and the relationship between father and daughter-in-law is somewhat strained. Jack Lemmon's character, I can't remember, is Ed, right?
Yeah, Ed.
He's kind of a bit surly. Is that?
Yeah.
Surly,
well, I thought that Costa-Gavras, he did a really Jack Lemmon is like the most dad-like dad in this movie. Like if you had if you go to Plato's world of platonic like ideal forms and you look up dad, it's Jack Lemmon in this movie.
Oh yeah, totally.
And he's so good in this. Like he has some real dramatic chops that you don't get to see that often.
No. I mean, we think of him.
Other movies.
We think of him and remember him more for his comedies, Some Like It Hot and whatever. But he's actually done some
right, like all the Billy Wilder or Some Like It Hot. Was Some Like It Hot Billy Wilder?
I'm not sure. Was it?
No, that wasn't
something to look up. But it was Jack Lemmon.
Yeah, it was Jack Lemmon because I know like the last 10 or 15, because Billy Wilder, he was still making those movies like well into the late 70s, and they get really weird towards the end, but every single one of them's got Jack Lemmon in it from a certain point. There's like Jack Lemmon as Sherlock Holmes in a Billy Wilder movie. That's a really weird movie. The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes. Anyway, so we have one of these kind of mysteries in reverse, right? And he shows up. They have a strained relationship because I kind of get the sense that Charles and his wife are, at least what Costa-Gavras' portrayal, I guess, of late 60s leftists moving to South America to be a radical leftist or journalist or something, or Latin America, as it were. Not that weird a thing to happen in the early 1970s. Like that's what what's his name, Robert Kramer, the one of the founders of the newsreel leftist movie collective in Chicago and New York, who anyway, yeah, that's what he did. And he made a couple films about just sort of living abroad as the citizen of the world.
In Latin America or Chile or other places?
He was all over the place. He made a lot of movies. His stuff is like that. That stuff is hard to find at this point. If I still had well, I never used the program BitTorrent or know what a private BitTorrent.
Oh yeah. I've never
like
heard that before. That's a new term.
Unobtainium kind of stuff. But no, I do remember I loved one Robert Kramer movie that basically worked off that premise. Like his estranged son, played by a very young Vincent Gallo, comes to visit this guy named Doc, who's played by Kramer himself, and I can't remember if it's like Cambodia or if it's somewhere in South America. It was so long ago I saw this movie. And yeah, they just kind of deal with the fact that like the son feels abandoned because the father went out to go save the world, and they kind of work through those tensions, and then it just sort of ends with at this standstill. It's weirdly like almost a mirror image of Missing, the movie we watched tonight, because I feel like a lot of the strength of Missing, and I think the reason why I started talking about the American left, is that he does everybody in the movie does a really good job of portraying this kind of rift between the World War II generation and the leftist elements of the boomer generation.
Okay.
In a way that I think was like pretty convincing. Like I've dealt with a lot of older people, a lot of people who own businesses or something. They're like very invested in this rhetorical notion of what America is. They're very naive about how governments work. They have no conception of what happens when governments collapse. What happens, in the United States, we have like Pearl Harbor. We haven't had a lot of like huge domestic everything falls to shit kind of moments since the Civil War. Thank God. But it did create in some parts of the population this sense of invulnerability, the sense that the outside world can't really touch them, or that somehow just this kind of bullheaded appreciation of America in some abstract sense would protect them from everything. And I think Jack Lemmon does a really good job of portraying that. Without it doesn't really seem over the top. Like he seems like a developed character. At the same time, he can carry that symbolic weight.
And he starts to change as he starts. Well, there's also I don't know if is naivete the right word. And he's actually
he gets savvy. Yeah, like he eventually figures out like
the U.S. is complicit in the coup. I mean,
complicit in the coup and probably complicit in the murder of his son. Yeah,
right. And there was another journalist who they were initially saying, oh, he went back to the U.S. Everything is all fine.
Right. There's like multiple scenes where the U.S. consulate brings in obvious like fake actors, and like the last one they send in is just basically to keep Jack Lemmon, aka Ed, from speaking to the press about anything that happened there, because the U.S. is complicit in. I mean, pretty much
Right.
the film leaves no real. Everybody they talk to, and they say like, oh, the military leaders, they can't kill an American without the approval of the American consulate.
Right.
And then also, what's the other? Well, yeah, they lie about the one guy who's actually dead, and they say like, oh, they sent him home.
Right, because what's Sissy Spacek's character's name?
Let me get the sleeve, because that's the nice thing with a laser disc is we got big chunky object to hand around.
Right. Well, it had on the cover, very clear. It said, starring Jack Lemmon and Sissy Spacek. But she and her father-in-law. Here's Dan pulling up the Laserdisc to look up information. Beth. Her name is Beth.
And we have nicely labeled. Oh, okay. Laserdisc. It summarizes the movie for you.
Oh, wow. All right.
So I don't even need to come up with a movie summary. So
you want to just read it?
Part
well, let's just finish. So Jack Lemmon and Sissy Spacek, Ed and Beth, they find as they're looking through all the dead bodies and the unidentified, the ones they said still aren't identified, and they find this guy. They find the American shot in the chest.
Right.
So he was clearly murdered, and then the State Department claims like, oh, there must have been some mix-up in immigration or something like that.
Well, and I thought what was kind of interesting is that his other friend at the newspaper, when we see the flashback scene of the guy who we later see as a corpse being led off to be killed in the stadium, we see the other guy later, but we don't know how he got out of the stadium.
Oh, so you think he might have been complicit, or just he lucked out?
No, I don't think he was complicit. I'm just not sure. Like, we don't get to see a lot of inner workings of how the stadium was actually run, because obviously that's not what the movie's about.
Right.
But it's just a little confused, although I'm sure there's probably like loads of books that can describe a lot of that in pretty extensive detail.
I mean, on the one hand, there's only so much you could put in a 2-hour movie, but then you make it a little longer. So. But so in the end, it turns out that in fact, Charles, the journalist who's been missing, is in fact dead. Mm-hmm. He was shot by the military, by the
pretty much as soon as pretty soon after the apartment was ransacked.
Yeah.
Sounds like
he didn't last very long.
And the U.S. consulate knew about it the whole time and was basically leading this guy on to keep him from being able to speak to the press.
Right,
and that's the implication of the movie.
And there is a reporter. She keeps coming up and.
Well, I think she's probably the person who wrote the book it was based on, right?
Oh, okay.
Based on the okay. This is based on the book by Thomas Hauser.
Oh, maybe it's based on her reporting, or there was a bunch of stuff. There's the notebook that had all the details. There's his family that was involved, his dad and his wife, who were going around looking for him. So they know stuff. So
yeah, and you get the sense that like the more they figure out, the more the guys at the consulate become these like creepy, like they literally compare themselves to the mafia by the end of it.
Yeah.
And I mean it's fair play, because this shit happened like repeatedly.
Yeah, the whole thing is a true story.
I mean, because like my friend Stan that I run the website with, he was friends with a priest who was a big leftist advocate over in South America, and like, I mean, we're talking like the late 80s even at that point. And he's like hanging out with this guy at Rutgers one moment, and then a couple months later he just disappeared. Nobody ever heard from the guy again.
Oh, wow.
Like at all. He went over to like Bolivia, or I forget where exactly it was, but yeah, like this was not
and they make clear in the movie that Bolivia's next. I mean, that's the participants, the one guy who's a retired naval engineer who for some reason is in Chile at this time, and he says that he's going to Bolivia.
He's so does
the reporter.
Like chuckling and kind of evil, and it's kind of weird because it's almost, because there's no way that he wouldn't know that the fact that he's telling this to this guy would get, like, the guy who's the quote unquote retired naval engineer who probably was directly involved in the coup of Salvador Allende. There's no way that he could divulge those details details without knowing that Charles was going to get killed.
Right.
For hearing them probably, and he seems like he's like enjoying the interaction, and like in retrospect I kind of feel like that's what it was, is like he secretly
wanted the guy dead,
basically. Yeah, and he was like, oh yeah, you can have all the information you want, kiddo.
Do you think he already knew who he was and was intentionally feeding him stuff, or he just knew that?
We'll never know, I guess.
Yeah, that's true.
That's just like one reading of it. I mean, the other reading could be, because I mean, these guys, these like assassination squads, the U.S. guys never really talk about it too much, apparently, except for to this guy Charles. But there's that whole other movie, the Act of Killing, that came out a couple years ago, where they got those two guys that were involved in the Indonesian death squads, and they're like literally like the documentary filmmaker, he basically hands them some money and says like, recreate your assassinations as like Hollywood movies, and he gets them to admit to all this stuff, and you see that because the society that surrounds them never punished them, because the massacres in Indonesia, the government has maintained has been the line of government descended from when the 65 massacres occurred since 65. So they're just like reveling in this, and
that's Suharto? Is that am I confusing countries?
Yeah, it might be Suharto.
Okay.
That's an errata thing, but
one day we'll do one.
But yeah, and that only came out a couple of years ago. But these guys, they're like, they think they're rock stars
because of all the great work they've done.
Well, they don't think they did anything wrong. They're like these weirdly happy-go-lucky guys, and it's like really creepy. And I feel like whoever played the like U.S. government assassin guy in this movie towards the beginning was in a little bit towards the end in flashback. That was like a really good bit performance. There's like a lot to analyze in there.
Wait, do you want to read the actual description from the back of
we have all the chapters, which are nicely put into sentences, so I can read them as if they're convincing human speech. So tell me afterwards if you're convinced. Beth and Charles become separated. Ed Horman begins search for his son. Ed meets the ambassador for the first time. Charles and Terry in Vienna as coup begins. Ed tells American officials that he needs their help in finding his son. David Holloway and Frank Tarugi. Frank Tarugi is the dead guy they find in the stadium basement, are arrested. Holloway and Tarugi are taken to the National Stadium. Ed Horman pleads with the ambassador to find his son. Ed and Beth enter the National Stadium. Beth finds Frank Tarugi's body at the morgue. Ed confronts the ambassador with information of Charles' death. The death of Charles is confirmed.
And they even have the temerity, the chutzpah at the end to say...
well, it literally says the end of the movie on the back of the thing. So like, if you pick this up in the store in 1982, you would have already had the ending spoiled by the packaging of the movie you just bought.
Well, and it's not really... and in some ways it's not really about the solving the mystery, and you're kind of waiting for him to be, everything's great. It's like, no, you know
he's dead pretty much from the beginning of the movie. Yeah,
it's like how is it going to be discovered? It's I was going to say it's the journey, but it's the path to get there, to find. It's the path to find out how they find out.
The mystery is who knows what and how much do they know, right? Because like the mystery is how much was the U.S. government complicit. Because the rest of it seems pretty like there's no reason to think there's any kind of great crazy detail beyond like he got picked up, probably got tortured, then he got shot, and then was put into the wall of the stadium.
Right. And possibly, maybe or maybe not, because of what he knew. And what he knew was actually while they were in, what's it called? Vina, where he was stuck because of where the when the coup happened. So there were all these Americans there, including Babcock, the retired naval engineer, and others, military officials and government officials, and they start saying stuff around him that just because he's American, it's safe. That's the way he himself puts it. But then he's actually learned an awful lot. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And this was, this movie was stating outright, look, the American government was involved and supported and helped organize the Pinochet The Pinochet coup.
Which there's
plenty.
There's a lot of documentary evidence of that now. If you go to, I don't know if you ever spent any time on the FBI or CIA vault websites.
Not me personally. Perhaps many in our multitude of audience have, and I'm guessing you.
When I was in college, because I had to do some research on something, I realized you can go on anything that anyone has ever done a Freedom of Information Act request on from the FBI or CIA, basically. In redacted form, but still, they're just on these two web pages. You can just search for anything. So you go to fbi.vault.gov, and there's 20,000 pages worth of information about what happened in COINTELPRO.
Wow.
There's 120 pages worth of material on personal threats to, or no, not 120. There's like 20 pages worth of stuff on Colonel Sanders.
Why?
Just because they'd save everything at the FBI. So there's like, he got a threatening fan letter once. There's a copy of that, and then a letter from J. Edgar Hoover saying, like, I don't think you have to worry about this, Mr. Sanders.
Oh, okay. It's not a file on him for his anti-government subversive activities.
Well, and he invited J. Edgar Hoover to his wedding. So there's like a wedding invitation, and then a polite decline in there. And then I think there's like one other. It's not a very exciting. The exciting FBI file is the one on the song Louie Louie, because it's like 120 pages long. There was a lot of FBI attention paid to the Kingsman version of Louie Louie from 1963.
What did they find or see? Well, not find, but what did they see and imagine in there?
Well, so they didn't initiate that hunt. So they when the song went on the air, like you've heard that recording, right? You can't really tell what the guy's singing, and all these parents from across the country started writing into the FBI. If you heard this song with these incredibly obscene lyrics, here are the obscene lyrics. And so I think there's at least like 20 or 30 different versions of what suburban parents, like awful XXX depraved shit that suburban parents thought the song Louie Louie was about in this file.
Wow. So is this like well, I don't know, like metal bands, if you play the album back, or so many other things, you play it
that was one of the
backwards,
first like satanic panic kind of scares about pop music.
Isn't there also I know, it was a Shake For Me Girl, I Want to Be Your Backdoor Man, and if you play it backwards, it was like, I am something with the devil, or
there's a book I used to own with a lot of, maybe I still have it somewhere, I can't remember, and it was one of those like satanic scare books. So it was published by some far-right Christian ministry, and it's just going through telling you, like, you play this Queen record backwards, and it says blah, 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 blah,
Queen.
Well, supposedly, like Stairway to Heaven played backwards. They're singing My Sweet Satan in some interpretations.
I once played Over the Rainbow backwards, and it talked about my descent into hell. And bringing back, I don't know.
Right, and there's like Revolution Number 9, supposedly play it backward. And I have played that backwards with like an MP3 thing. No, that's I Am the Walrus. Revolution Number 9, if you play it backwards, it basically sounds like a police recording of a car accident, which is a huge thing in the Paul McCartney is secretly dead theory.
Which is all over the what is it, Sgt. Pepper's album? Aren't there all the hints that he's dead? All these. Wow, they had really fun.
They had a lot of fun with that. When
Paul McCartney is still one of the two left alive.
Well, I have a live album called Paul McCartney is Alive and Well in America, and you can guess why it's named that.
Well, he's alive and well in America, but not in Britain? No, I don't know.
Well, no, it's just a live album, and he's phrasing it as if I'm not dead.
Yeah. Seriously, people, why are you seeing Paul is dead in all these things? Although, do you think they were? I mean, were the Beatles like were they trolling everyone? Or
the looks thing, I can honestly believe that you could find like a random person who looked more like Paul McCartney than Paul McCartney in a crowd if you tried hard enough, because there's that story about like the Charlie Chaplin impersonator contest, and Chaplin entered and he got third. Right? But to find somebody who could actually carry on a career in music like that progressed that logically from one thing to the next with that kind of huge discontinuity seems, I mean, beyond the like millions of other reasons why that theory makes no sense, but
for starters, Paul McCartney's alive.
Why am I starting this out on the defensive?
What about Paul McCartney being dead?
About Paul, yeah. Like the burden of proof is on me to say that Paul McCartney isn't dead.
Well, because the Beatles themselves said that Paul McCartney's dead. They put it all out on the Sgt. Pepper's cover. So
right, he like doesn't have the shoes on in the Abbey Road cover.
Yeah. Oh, so anyways, back on missing. You said earlier about how with Chile and Salvador Allende. I said Allende. Allende. Thank you. I 2 L's. So yeah. About not learning about it in school. I actually did. I learned about it in high school. Oh. So this is probably 88 or 89. But I was very lucky. I had this really cool teacher. It was American history. And he talked a lot about that kind of stuff. He was very liberal in a very conservative area. And it was great. You know, and some of the students, they called him a communist or socialist or whatever. And I thought like, wow, I was further left than he was, at least at the time. I don't know. Well, yeah, anyways. And he would talk a lot about that kind of stuff. And he told us about what happened. And that, you know, you had the U.S. was involved in a coup of a democratically elected government. I mean, granted.
Multiple times.
Multiple times. Yeah.
12 out of the 14 military dictators that eventually took over Latin America over the course of the operation. I should explain what Operation Condor is.
Yeah. What's Operation Condor?
So,
and this is when I sit back and learn, and so does everybody else.
So Operation Condor is the official CIA name given to the project initiated and kind of come up with by Henry Kissinger, who somehow is still alive. Go figure. But
war criminals live the longest. War criminals never die, and I don't know what the rest of that is, but apparently they don't.
He has like a bin full of babies he's been sucking stem cells out of in his room or something.
Oh.
Right, that's like I don't know. I don't wish well on that man. But anyway,
he's a terrible person.
Horrible person.
And he's still used for politicians and government figures. Go to him
Hillary
for advice.
Clinton was bragging about the fact she was friends with Henry Kissinger.
That was unbelievable.
And
that was
I don't know how the Hillary people were able to like circle that wagon, because that's.
Did they even see that as a problem or a liability?
No, I don't think so, because that was when the whole Bernie bro thing was in full swing, and like I got into, well, I shouldn't name names, so there's an avant-garde female filmmaker who is a big fan of Hillary Clinton, who I got into a fight with on my Facebook page close to the last election. I don't believe we're Facebook friends anymore.
But you got in a fight directly with her?
On the Facebook page, yeah, because I was basically like, I mean, I was pissed at Clinton because of the super delegate thing. I was saying like, although, hey, you know, the kids were pissed. There's reasons we're pissed. It didn't end well.
Yeah,
but there's good reasons we're pissed.
Remind me to say something about super delegates. So, but go
ahead. And you know, and I mentioned the thing about like, okay, everybody that when I got out of college, everybody was struggling to get jobs, and like, you know, the economy was shit. And also the fact that she was publicly bragging about the fact she was friends with Henry Kissinger. And I just outright, if I remember the Facebook comment, this was like years ago, but yeah, and I was just like, how can you, because like this lady made a movie about the Nazi regime and everything, and I was, and about some of these political issues in the 80s, and I was like, yeah, no, like I'm going with the guy who says that he's not friends with Henry Kissinger. every time.
What a sad
if
world.
if that's my penis talking, and that's the kind of like thoughts that my penis has, then that would honestly explain a lot about why my life has turned out the way it is. I'm just imagining like my dick with a hat on saying like I don't like the person who prefers Henry Kissinger. No, but anyway,
Wait, did you just confess to being a Bernie bro?
Well, I was just thinking,
I know.
if I'm really talking with my dick and all that's coming out is like complicated economic political analysis, that would explain a lot of like what my dick was doing between the years of like 2007 and
I'm trying to remember what mine was doing because it wasn't doing much. Oh, by that point it was, but you know,
it was reading a lot of internet articles.
Yeah,
because it was there with me, and it got more out of them than the rest of me did apparently. But
yeah, mine wasn't doing much during the second term of the Clinton presidency, and probably for most of the second Bush W presidency. But anyways,
so we get into this space.
Enough about our dicks.
But anyway, so Operation Condor. So Henry Kissinger comes up with this plan. There have been a lot of tensions between the United States and Spanish-speaking countries across the world for a while. The Bay of Pigs, famous example. I was going to say going back to the Bay of Pigs, but it goes back further than that. You know, if we want to take this back really far, we could go back to like 1896 and all that stuff. Anyway, a long history of this. So because of the fact that a lot of those areas, they don't have a large enough population or government to fight back if the United States sends in military force and says like, hey, you're going to go farm bananas for us. The other reason being that they have a lot of natural resources, and the U.S. would like to create some kind of, I mean, I'm trying to think like I guess modern or not modern, contemporary colonialism. It works on kind of an inverted triangular trade, right? Because like the classic triangular trade was like your country raids the other country for resources. You take the resources to your country, you sell them back to the other country as goods at a markup or something.
Okay.
So in this case, you have I mean, you do have a lot of natural resource extraction in the form of oil. There's a lot of oil down there. That's the real reason why the U.S. government hates Hugo Chavez so much. And there's oil, there's bananas, there's coffee, you name it. There's a lot of stuff down there. And if they have democratic, ethical, correct control over their own countries, the citizens of these countries, then the prices of these goods go up. In the profit margins of these large multinational companies go down. The large multinational companies, I mean, they're the reason why the Bay of Pigs happened. The Bay of Pigs happened because basically the United Fruit Company, who produced bananas, they were losing a bunch of money, and they said to John F. Kennedy, like, aren't you going to protect all our bananas over there in Cuba? So John F. Kennedy was like, all right, yeah, I'll risk nuclear Armageddon to get you some more money on your bananas, basically. And that has been the spirit of most of the United States' relationship with South America, with Latin America. And so Operation Condor is an extension of that, and probably the most gruesome and worst chapter in that saga. It begins in 1973 with the assassination of Salvador Allende, which is the event which kind of triggers everything that happens in Missing, the movie we watched tonight. And it continues on. It stops for like 3 years when Jimmy Carter's president because he finds out about it and puts a stop to it. And then as soon as Ronald Reagan is elected, it's back running full steam. And 14 governments were toppled, democratically elected by and large, were replaced with military dictatorships to control the price of labor and goods that were being sent from those countries. The leaders of these coups were funded and very often trained in the United States graduates at an institution known as the School of the Americas, which is in Fort Bennington, Georgia. Or it was called the School of the Americas. Now they changed the name because obviously they don't want a lot of attention being paid to this particular institution. They changed the name to the Institute for Foreign Policy Cooperation or something.
Wow.
It's like super, super creepy. And you can sit in on classes there. Like, most of them are in Spanish language. But when I was on the road with Brian making the movie, we seriously considered, like, trying to sit in on a Spanish language counterinsurgency course and try to film some of it for the movie.
Can you find any of those classes online? Or they might.
I mean, if you go to their website, you can sign up to audit a course for free
online.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
It's just like freaky, right? And so out of the 14 governments that were toppled in Latin and South America over between 73 and 80, I think 89 was when Operation Condor technically ended. Or like officially ended, but none of this shit ever ends. And I think like the State Department got more of a boner for the Middle East at that point. But I mean, not that they weren't doing stuff in the Middle East before then, but
the focus shifted.
But yeah, so out of the 14 military dictators, 12 of them were graduates of the School of the Americas. And the School of the Americas, it's still there, and it's been there since 1955. And when there's suddenly political unrest somewhere, like the entire thing that happened with Chavez and Maduro recently, I don't feel like, I don't think there was any good way that Maduro could have handled any of this, because it's being set up essentially to show the rest of the world, like, oh, okay, this thing fails inevitably, right? Because, like, the greatest argument in favor of capitalism at this point, when it doesn't seem to make any sense, is that there's some kind of supernatural force that forces any kind of socialism to fail. And the U.S. government was trying to assassinate Chavez for a very long time. That was documented by Greg Palast, who's a reporter. And yeah, they were trying to assassinate him because he wanted to raise the tax that BP and some other big gas companies were paying for gas from 1%, which is, most of those companies, they pay 1% tax on profits, not on gross, to the governments of the countries where they get these incredibly lucrative leases from. They frequently get tax breaks on production of the setting up the infrastructure to get the oil. So Chavez was saying, all right, we want 15%, which seems way more reasonable, right? Because technically the people of the country own the resources, not the company. And that was enough to get him on the kill list, basically. And there was a huge propaganda offensive in the U.S. against that, and that's not uncommon, and that's why a lot of this, if you have a successful communist socialist, Maduro was not a communist, or he was in some ways he was a socialist, but any kind of leftist government, then the argument of like the inevitability of free market capitalism and that kind of stuff starts collapsing. So that. What was the point I was making?
Do you know when I first learned about the School of the Americas?
When?
It was in that same history class in senior year of high school. Junior or senior year of high school in the late 80s. So that's how, well, I can't think of a better way to put this. That's how cool that teacher was, who, by the way, was also the head football coach. He might have been head coach for the whole school, but he was in charge of football.
It's always funny who's like on the football team sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, you think, oh, he's the football coach, so he must be some right wing jingoist. And no, in fact, he taught us the difference between jingoism and patriotism, and say that you can be a patriot and you can love your country and want to change things about the government and be critical of the government, and that he was talking about the 60s and all the protests and all that, and saying that they were, these people were patriotic. They were opposed to policies, and it's precisely because of they were acting out of their patriotism, calling out against these evil. So
anyways. The whole idea of organizing large groups of people around this mythical idea of a nation state isn't even that, like, that's a relatively recent phenomena. That's only like 350 years old.
Is it that old?
If that, yeah.
Yeah, if that.
Like, the whole idea of nationalism is a replacement for ethnic identity, or just basically like general tax collection areas, right? Because that's feudalism is basically just a bunch of overlapping areas of tax collection.
Yeah.
With like private militaries or whatever. But
so, well, I'll just say shout out to Mr. Buford for teaching us this stuff, or trying to teach us. Well, I remember, so my sister is a few years younger, and I remember talking to her and to some of her friends just a few years behind us, and I remember one friend who was saying that he was the only teacher that actually took them seriously and took them and their thoughts seriously. So he would challenge us, but he would also listen, and he would have a conversation with us as opposed to just telling us. Yeah, and this was the same teacher that others thought was a rabid socialist who was too political. And saying, great, yeah, be political in a history class when you're discussing politics.
Well, that's the weird thing about it, or one of the weird things about how they teach history in American schools, I think, is that on the one hand, you don't want these like rabid partisans all over the place in the school system, because you don't want it to start looking like, or I guess you could have like it, so long as they don't agree, then it would be fine. But obviously you get enough of them agreeing, and they all have strong feelings about this, that, or the other thing, and it starts to look a little bit like forced education, one of these military regimes we're talking about. But yeah, just like the lack of any kind of stakes. I remember my like high school history teachers, they were all basically just like kind of like low-key frat bros. Like, I didn't get the sense they had a personal politics,
just opposed to any kind of
like I'm sure they probably had like some kind of centrist, or not, like some of them might have been to the right or whatever, but they didn't
center right.
Yeah, they were like those people, the kind of people like the Military History Channel, basically like the guy teaching the history class was generally always like one of those people you could imagine watching the History Channel for like 6 hours on the weekend.
I'm trying to remember my other history teachers, and I'm trying to remember how much we learned about stuff like genocide of Native Americans, like
in fourth
slavery,
grade, we
but
heard
the
a
real
lot
details
about that.
What was that?
I remember when I was in fourth grade, we didn't go over the genocide of the Indians that much. We went over like different Indian tribal cultures for 6 months for some reason.
We did have a lot of that when I lived in the Pacific Northwest. That was actually the history of the PNW was one of the mandatory classes, and we talked a lot about that. Learned it was really interesting. That's not what we learned about genocide. That's what we learned about Native American groups and cultures and stuff like that. But you were saying?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the history we were taught was just sort of, it just wasn't a very accurate or thorough vision of events. There was very, like, in retrospect, it seems like there was very little context to anything because of the fact that right-wing, left-wing, like, what they actually were in any kind of detail couldn't be spoken about that much because you're just sort of going through dates and events so quickly.
When I switched to in college, the classes I took were mostly social history, so it went from shifting again. Well, some of the difference is high school to college courses, but also it was depending on the focus of history classes, of whether it was learning a lot about dates, a lot of it being the military history and saying this battle occurred here and this battle occurred then, and
right, everything's viewed through that great men theory of history, right? Like everything is about like big important people deciding, like making decisions, and then sort of analyzing those decisions from this armchair quarterback pose.
Yeah, I did a little bit of research for a class once. It was about World War II, and so I read a bunch of press clippings or press clippings. That sounds too fancy. I read a bunch of newspaper articles from from around Pearl Harbor, so and the U.S. entry into the war, going towards near the end of the war, or even the end. And it's interesting the way the focus earlier on is on the soldiers, and so not naming individual people, but about how all the soldiers, our boys, our men, were going off to war and all this stuff. And then towards the end, there's a lot of focus more on the individual generals, or people higher up. So we learn about Patton, and we learn about Eisenhower, or we hear about who said I shall return and I have returned. Who fought with Truman?
MacArthur.
Thank you. I kept thinking, okay, it's not Custer. The name Custer came to mind.
No, Custer. Custer was out of the game at that point.
Yeah, definitely. But so you see, you read about MacArthur, but it's no longer about the soldiers or the sort of trying to remember, G.I. Joe, or there's a better nickname for the soldiers at that time. But anyways, you don't hear about them anymore. You hear about the individual generals and so on. And I'm saying the great men of history.
Right. I feel like a lot of the discussion of presidents and higher up types in the history courses we were taking, like Winston Churchill comes up a lot because you have to cover World War II, but nothing's mentioned about India. Nothing's mentioned about the Armenians. Nothing's mentioned about, like when they teach you about the Depression without talking about the fact that there was an upward swelling of support for leftist politics.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot that's missing in it. Get the name of the episode in there.
There's There's just because you brought up Indonesia earlier and what you just said now, that reminds me of
the Indonesia thing that never comes up, and the U.S. was involved in that. There was like thousands upon thousands of people that just like the U.S. pretty much came in there and said like, hey, you guys got free reign to kill anybody you don't like.
Right. But going back further, because, the Dutch were the colonial masters there, right, before World War II. After World War II, the Netherlands is liberated. The Netherlands gets Indonesia back, or it's once again a Dutch colony. And there's an insurrection. People in Indonesia don't want the Dutch back.
Right.
And the Dutch, there was a brutal campaign to suppress any kind of the insurrection and any kind of opposition. In the end, Indonesia, over a long process, the Dutch leave.
And for whatever reason, these events always seem to happen in places where a lot of cheap and or exploitative labor happens.
But
this is obviously all about politics and not about the cost of labor.
But so the Dutch, there's this really cool museum, which in Amsterdam, which of all places is directly across from the zoo, and it's a really cool zoo. But it's called something like the Museum of Tolerance, and they had an exhibit there about the Dutch in Indonesia after World War II, in which and it's about how the Dutch, it showcases all of the brutality, and also about how the Dutch kind of didn't talk about it for decades until it finally came up. It was something like a documentary that aired on Dutch television, and there's a big outcry and all this stuff about it, but it opened up the discussion, and how the Dutch are finally...
Was this a couple of years ago?
Let's see, I was...
2015-ish?
Could it have been that late? Because
it's probably the movie I was talking about earlier, The Act of Killing.
But that's about the Dutch in Indonesia? This is about the Dutch, specifically about...
this is about like the just the killing squads in Indonesia in 1965
by the Indonesian government.
No. Okay.
So this is before that. This is when the Dutch are still in charge, and their groups
so it just
fighting for independence.
To be in Indonesia.
It sucks to be in Indonesia, no matter. Yeah, if you're the average person in Indonesia, it sucks. It sucks. Yeah. Or it did. Partly it does now too. But it was about the Dutch were starting to finally talk about what had been going on there, and they weren't just the innocent victims in World War II. They were also the oppressors in Indonesia before and after. So, anyways, but the whole idea. I I don't know why I went on this. It was just about the whole idea of
Well, I think
the military
World War
history.
II was like really important to the powers that be as this sort of rhetorical device to prop up the idea that the system was inherently, or the system of world governments that were around then, particularly capitalism as a social or as a structure of social organization at that point in time. Certainly it didn't seem like some kind of foregone conclusion or like a thing that existed forever in, say 1945, because everybody just gotten out of the Depression, right? Eugene Debs was getting like good numbers in national elections and whatnot. And so, yeah, World War II had to become about, there is a black and white, good and evil. There is like a set clear line between tyrannical states and good states, which of course starts leading you back towards that kind of racialist rhetoric, pro-capitalist propaganda that has proliferated around the world since World War II, has created a kind of weird melding of nationalist tensions and racialist tensions. Right, because like I don't think like the kind of uninformed American or right wing Americans fear distrust of Arabic people, Islamic people, Muslims, etc. It's not really. I don't feel like it's within parameters of like a pseudoscience anymore at this point. It's not.
What do you mean?
Well, they're not specifically like coming at it from like, this one race is this race and this race is superior, or this one nation. Actually, now that I hear what I'm saying, like the Nazi thing kind of did all of that, but I guess it's less specifically defined. It's just sort of like the people that have kind of couched or not couched genocidal tendencies seem far less self-conscious about it at this time around. Like there's less
explicitly calling it evil, or I don't understand.
No, like we have stupid Nazis, right? Like you read any of the no, I swear to God, like 1930s, German newspapers, this, that, the other thing. They're going out of their way to make this case of like race science is real, and your head is like because they think the public needs to be convinced in some way. Whereas I feel like these contemporary Nazis, they don't. I mean, also just to rhetorically convince themselves, because they have this belief in some kind of like a just world fallacy in their head that they need to maintain within the parameters of being a self-professed Nazi. And I think that like the contemporary or white nationalist, or white supremacist, etc.,
racialist, not racist, racialist.
The more recent ones, they seem like nihilists. They don't really seem to care whether any of it's convincing. It's about the aesthetics. It's not about finding a correct answer, or like an answer that appeals to their. Well, I mean, obviously like parts of it are it's.
Or they have the answer. They don't care about the argument on how to get there.
I mean, I guess like at any point in time, those sorts of things are completely insincere, because ultimately it's not about, the person doesn't sincerely believe anything. The person is enacting some kind of theatrical ritual that eventually allows them to have some kind of release that they want, in terms of like being angry at something, being violent with something, or you name it. And that's really what, and I think that's what the movie tonight, I think, got across to a large extent, was that on some level, every one of these military coups is kind of like just declaring a hell night for a certain antisocial element of the population, and that's what actually appeals to that element of the population. It's like that line between like everybody rioting after a football game and then everybody not wanting to go home, and then just keep breaking shit every like 30, 40 years.
Turning over and burning cars.
Yeah, like this desire to be completely freed from any kind of formal restraints by society outside of this rigid hierarchy of the military.
Well, I don't know if this gets at what you're saying, but we see actually even early on, we see people waiting for the bus, but they look like they're, I think it's a line of people waiting for the bus, but in the end it looks like it's a line of people almost waiting to get shot, and the one of the jeeps full of soldiers or military trucks, whatever, stops, and a couple of soldiers get out and they start eyeing the people in the line, and they end up pulling two women out of there, and one of them says, now in this country, women wear dresses.
Right.
Everyone else is now on the bus. I think Sissy Spacek is seeing what happens she's on the bus. When she sees the soldier, he cuts up the slacks that one of the women is wearing. But I don't know how I got there from what you were just saying. But part of the Hell Night.
Power, right?
Right.
It's the fact that, like, this guy who, before he got into the military, probably everybody was like, you know, people aren't voluntarily going near this person because they're a bad person. But as soon as they get in the military and there's this kind of conspiracy of bad people. Oh, yeah, I mean, the Russians, like Stalin, he'd just be like, do whatever. And especially, I mean, what happened in, like, the Nanking thing, like, the Asian front wasn't immune to that. I mean, there were just a lot of really horrible things that happened for a while going on there.
Yeah, when my father's family, they're from Romania, Hungarian-speaking portion of Romania, but still Romania. And he was born there. And when, during World War II, when Romania was liberated, they actually, the women in my dad's family, they wouldn't leave the house at night because, God forbid, a Russian soldier or Russian soldiers would find them. So here are the people that liberated the country, and they're pretty scary too.
Oh, yeah. And it's, I mean, the country's not really liberated until you don't have, like, soldiers walking around on the street anymore. I mean, my grandfather used to tell, he was part of the U.S. occupation of, where was he in Japan? In Japan after the war. I think he was in Okinawa. And yeah, it was like really weird when he would tell me the stories about this stuff. It was like very clearly important to him that he'd tell me these stories, but it would come across as like weirdly, like he had this God complex or something, just because he was an American in this situation, right? Like he's, he apparently had a lot of fun with, quote unquote, geishas, and he was like, he got like very, defensive when I mentioned like a prostitute thing. Although apparently my grandma, I mean, I probably shouldn't be talking about some of this stuff, but like
you don't have to say everything on here.
Oh yeah, well,
keep stuff back.
I can't remember what stuff, but so there was a starving guy that came up, and that wasn't uncommon because there were a lot of food shortages in Japan. The starving guy comes up to the canteen and goes up to the U.S. soldiers and he says, "Please shoot me." And so they refused to shoot him, and they gave him some food out of like the dumpster or something because they had so much leftover food because the U.S. didn't face any domestic warfare. And I just remember him telling me that story, but it didn't really sink into him. Like, he never made the connection of like, the experience that would have led somebody to end up walking up to the canteen and saying, "Please shoot me." Mm-hmm. Never quite connected. And like when you talk to him, he'd sound a lot like Jack Lemmon at the beginning of this movie.
Okay.
I remember I got into a huge argument with him once where I told him, I mean, this is reported by the New York Times. This isn't like controversial information, but Barack Obama has that kill list, right? There's an actual kill list.
No, I wasn't aware of this.
Actual drone kill list. Oh, okay. Well,
yeah.
Yeah, the drone kill list. And I mentioned this to him.
Okay. Sorry, go on.
No. So I mentioned this to him, and he was like, and he reads the New York Times every day. Mm-hmm. Or, well, he's dead now, but he read the New York Times every day for a very long time. And he refuses to believe that this is true. And we're like screaming about it. I'm like, I'm showing him this news article from the New York Times, and he won't believe that there's a kill list.
Right, we're not exactly talking about leftist, radical, blah, blah, blah.
Well, he was one of the guys who, like, walked out for the first teachers union strike in New York. Like, he was pretty far to the left when he was a kid, but yeah, that, like, kind of, we need to have this absolute faith in America being exceptional in some spiritual capacity, or else this is all meaningless kind of vibe like that.
Right.
That really came through there.
Although there is a difference between fighting for a domestic cause and thinking and ways of understanding, I want to say external, the enemies from without as opposed to the enemies from within.
Right.
You don't have to be let's say, left on in all causes in all ways, or right wing in all causes in all ways, or even center in all ways. You have a mixture of things. I remember once I was visiting a friend of mine in California, and as part of my trip there, we went to a clinic defense. This was the height of the pro-choice versus pro-life, in which abortion clinics were, let me rephrase that, clinics that provided abortion were bombed. And there were massive protests outside of clinics in which the protesters wouldn't let people through and all this stuff. So I went there. So we had clinic defenses. So yeah, that's part of what I did on vacation with them. But we were sitting outside. It was a pretty light day. There were only a couple of anti-abortion protesters out there, and there's this woman we were talking to, and she learned a lot from her, and she came there every Saturday or Sunday or whatever it was. She referred to herself as very pro-choice and very pro-death penalty. And afterwards, my friend and I were just trying to figure out, we weren't quite sure what very pro-death penalty meant. But it was just, at first I thought, what an odd just juxtaposition. I didn't realize that somebody could be both pro-choice and pro-death penalty. I mean, they're both, leftist positions versus being pro-life, and anti-death penalty being right-wing positions. I'm like, well, no, it doesn't work that way.
You could be like anti-life.
And okay,
generally,
that's me.
And then that you square both, you cover both bases there.
Wait, am I No, I'm reversed. So I am pro-choice and opposed to the death penalty. So I'm I mixed my pro-death and pro-life, right?
I'm pro-abortion.
Yeah, that's how I refer to myself too. Not pro-choice, but pro-abortion.
I'm anti-baby.
Oh, God.
I don't like babies.
Oh, there's a group based in Somerville, I think. I don't know if it still exists, but the Church of the
whiny babies.
No, they would have signs like eat a queer fetus for Jesus or something like that. And it's a really, really interesting group. I don't know how much, if they had any serious beliefs in there, or maybe they did. I don't know. And it was just the way of they were presenting themselves. But by the way, okay, I say pro-abortion, not pro-choice, but I think in a very different way that you do, apparently. So, but in that, I think that abortion is a legitimate form of contraception. It's not just a last ditch thing. But that's my and I think there's more and more coming out about not feeling the shame about having an abortion, as if it's this horrible thing you've done. But women coming out and actually saying, yeah, I have an abortion, because it's really common.
Like I want the woman to have the choice. But, I'm also I got to be honest about what I'm rooting for, right? So that's how I'm anti-baby. So it's not, I'm pro-choice too. I'm in favor of the choices. I'm just, the only thing I'm really against here is babies. That everybody else, everything else, you're cool.
All right, so we need to make sure that no one ever puts you in charge of babysitting any of your friends' kids.
Well, I was looking at the demographics for our podcast, right? Because we get that like pie chart from corporate every month, and you know what percentage of our listeners share is babies?
How many babies do we have listening? I don't think the number was very high, but I don't remember the exact number. What was it?
It was low. It was 0%.
Yeah, it was in the low zeros.
It was in the low zeros. So, babies, like, it's
maybe if you weren't so anti-baby, we'd get some more baby listeners.
Well, but like I haven't made my anti-baby stances public until this episode.
Oh, that's true. Now, if we did have those low zeros,
maybe we'll get like a lot of babies hate listening now.
Yeah. Or maybe now we'll get more babies listening because they want to understand. It's not what's the word I'm trying to think of? Not love hating, hate listening. It's like hate listening. So I intentionally want to listen to somebody that I hate and can't stand. So it would be like, well, in the days when I used to listen to Rush Limbaugh, it'd be like watching, and then there was watching Bill O'Reilly, and now it's watching Sean Hannity, that kind of stuff. That's hate watching, hate listening, that sort of thing. I don't do that anymore. I find no purpose in it. There is I
only hate watch Baby Geniuses 2 Super Babies.
Wow, you really don't like babies.
I haven't found the need to find a second hate watch movie because it just like hits the spot every single time.
Well, we did talk about Boss Baby a while back. although that might just give you more ammunition for hating babies.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's why should the baby be the boss? Like, we all worked hard. We all know shit.
The baby's no more.
The baby. Don't forget about me. I'm the baby. See, like, I think it was because Dinosaurs was on TV at like a formative period of my life when I should have been like. Honestly, the point in my life where I probably should have been the most pro baby, unless it was like, like a bunch of extra siblings showing up out of nowhere or something. Because Dinosaurs, I was like 3, 4, or 5. That's not my mama. Right? And all of my memories of babies are just like, oh my god, it's this fucking annoying, needy, like shitty thing that looks like something like I blew into a tissue, right? Like,
mama, not the mama, mama, not the mama.
As I completely forgot, but the Potteraptor reminded me in last episode, 2 episodes ago, that the baby used to hit the dad with a frying pan.
Yeah, the baby used to hit the dad with like that baby and the baby's voice. That's like effective birth control. Like, that would scare jizz back into my dick.
Ew.
Right? Like that, like the thought of ever having, like, I think even more than Eraserhead, like, you've seen Eraserhead before, right? Now?
Yeah.
Right? With the, like, is like a nightmare baby scenario. I think Dinosaurs almost surpasses Eraserhead for me. Like, I'd rather have the cow fetus baby than the Dinosaurs baby.
Ew. Oh my god. Well, how did we get here? From a movie about a journalist that went missing during the Pinochet coup. On the plus side, we got to a more jocular point, a more jovial point in the episode, which was, dare I say, sorely missing. Yeah, wow. I'm sorry. I'm bringing the house down. I'm bringing the tone down.
We're going on a
journey. I'm putting a damper on our fun.
Well, we're going on a journey to find answers.
Yeah. And these are part of the
answers. And we're finding things we did not expect, unlike the people in this movie, except for Jack Lemmon for like the first 30 minutes. But after that, I think everybody kind of knows what to expect.
Yeah, do you think they realized that they were going to get the answer that they least wanted to hear? The answer that they knew, the answer that they were just afraid to hear somebody say it outside.
I think Beth knew as soon as she walked in the apartment.
Yeah,
on some level. I don't think the father and I don't think Ed. I mean, you can kind of see Ed going through the stages of grief through the film, right? Because he's like in denial, and then he's angry, and then he's doing this, and they get in those nice little like subtle moments where he does stuff that you see his son do earlier in the movie, like the thing with the cab door.
And he does, after a little while, so still well before the end, but after a little while, he actually says something, I just want to know, just bring me back my boy, dead, alive. I'll sign any release. I won't hold anyone accountable or whatever. Just bring him back to me. But he says even even if he's dead.
Right.
So he's finally starting to realize that him being dead is a real possibility. That it's not just about finding him alive and having him return. It's about just finding out what
anything.
Happened. Find anything.
And then the U.S. government stalls sending the body back to the U.S. for 7 months, so there can't be an autopsy of any import or meaning.
And right. I started saying about the chutzpah, the temerity, was when they do that. They also
charge them for it. Yeah,
they charge $900 as a delivery fee. That was on top. That was an additional fee on top of the just shipping.
Right.
How, on top of everything, how can they throw, that one more indignity on top of it?
Well, because they're coming at it from an angle of like, if we don't act selfish in this situation, we look culpable in our entire... Right, because like the people at the consulate, the only thing they seem to care about is whether he talks to the press or not. So they're probably, it seems like the only thing any of those people cared about was like check your ass shit. The consulate types, the military types.
Oh, I've always heard it as cover your ass, but.
Oh yeah, CYA, yeah.
CYA.
And I definitely think it was interesting that this was the director is Greek.
And this is his first feature film?
No.
Oh, I thought it was his first. Sorry. I don't know. I came up with that. I think I misunderstood something he said.
No, he made his most famous film was called Z, and that was released before this movie because it's mentioned on the back of the Laserdisc case. But
so it's really interesting. Although you can explain it again. Just to finish. This movie was nominated for so many Academy Awards for Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Film, and it's not.
It won the Palme d'Or at Cannes.
Yeah, and yet it doesn't really have the wide distribution it deserves. But sorry, I just wanted to mention that.
And Jack Lemmon got Best Actor at Cannes that year.
Wow, and deservedly so.
Yeah, he's great in this movie.
But you were starting to say something. Sorry, I just wanted to finish. Finish that bit.
I think it's interesting that he's a Greek director because I think that allows him to sketch the Jack Lemmon character so thoroughly and so accurately because he's kind of looking at it from the outside. It's a remarkably, for how emotionally loaded the subject matter is and for how much potential there is for like schlock or sentimentality, like this is a almost completely unsentimental film. Like the parts where it would possibly get kind of, or like the emotional emphases all seem to be on like kind of spooky, vacant seeming moments, right? Like the stuff that's popping out in my head is before we see the American journalist get let off to the stadium to be killed, we see the other guy getting let off to be killed as sort of foreshadowing, and we just have this short shot. I think there's like 3 shots of that corridor going into the stadium.
Yeah, he looks at it. I think twice you see it empty, and then the third time
there's like a naked guy bleeding out of
that's being led down it.
And
eventually we see that's he must have made it down that corridor too.
Yeah, and I think that lack of sentimentality is definitely it's a product of the fact that it wasn't made by a U.S. director. I feel like most U.S. directors working with this material, like imagine Steven Spielberg.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Or like hell, we saw around the same period with the same CIA, Argo, Ben Affleck.
Okay.
The CIA is like okaying the assassination of U.S. citizens abroad. Meanwhile, the movie that Ben Affleck thinks he needs to make is about how they're like saving, right? Because basically, like Argo is this movie in reverse. Argo is like the U.S. kids get in over their head somewhere abroad. They need to get snuck out alive. This movie is,
and the CIA is the hero in that one,
right? And Ben Affleck plays the guy from the CIA, and And in this movie, they go to retrieve the kid, and it turns out the U.S. government was complicit in killing him.
Yeah.
And so it's like really weird.
Very complicit.
Very complicit. Which this movie makes me hate Argo that much. Argo is such a fucking terrible movie.
Well, that would have been an interesting double feature. Terrible double feature.
God, yeah. That would... Like, I don't get it, because it seems like whenever Ben Affleck makes public statements, he doesn't seem like some kind of right-wing guy. Maybe he just thought the story was so exciting that it transcended any kind of political implications in how he told it. Or something.
Well, what's the what was the movie series, and now it's a TV series with I want to say Jack Reacher. That's not right.
Homeland.
No, well, there's that too. I'm thinking about 24? The one from Jim from The Office. 24.
The Tom Clancy thing with it's got the dude from The Office, but it used to be Matt Damon.
Yeah, there was. Oh, was it
Born Identity? No, I think it's somebody else.
This is something else. But there were a few movies with different actors portraying the same character. Now it's a TV series on I forget which pay station, or if it's a Netflix or Amazon series. I can't remember. But anyways, he's the hero. I think he's CIA or something like that. He's government. He's definitely government.
I mean, like 24 is the same kind of deal. Like,
there's
a terrorist and he's gonna blow everything up unless like this guy who looks like he stepped out of an Eddie Bauer advertisement tortures somebody.
And maybe they're bucking the system a little bit, right? They go up against the internal bureaucracy or the people who say, you don't want to know too much. They try to keep them away from stuff. But at the end of the day, they're still CIA.
Right. They got to make the stuff look sexy a little bit so that when you have the like money shot at the end of the episode of 24 or whatever. Well, I guess you don't get the money shot usually at the end of the episode of 24 because it's the whole idea of the show. But
he's good CIA.
Right. Everybody in the CIA, or like fucking what's another shameful movie? Mississippi Burning with Gene Hackman. That's like such a disgusting movie. You have this portrayal of these three FBI guys basically trying to create or trying to maintain racial harmony in the South in the 1950s, as if the exact opposite didn't happen. So many occasions. But you got this like need to, because the government and authority figures, they're all it's the surrogate father figure in the people like those kinds of movies because it's just sort of saying like, oh, this thing is benign and it will not hurt you. Like even this movie, they had a line about that earlier in the movie, I thought, right? Like when Jack Lemmon first shows up in the country, I forget if it's not Sissy Spacek, it's like one of the military guys or something like that, and they're saying, oh, these Americans, they always think that when someone disappears there has to be a reason or something, or like a thing they did.
No, it's not Sissy Spacek that says that. It's someone else. Yeah, you're right. That was a pretty I won't say harrowing, but a sort of an eye-opening perspective. But we see also that's what the average American thinks. It's certainly not what the military and State Department folks, etc., and certainly CIA.
Yeah, nobody in the loop thinks that.
Yeah. By the way, I was just looking up, and it's Jack Ryan. That's Jack Ryan, CIA analyst, and if I recall, he was played, I think, in okay, what's the one with, is it The Hunt for Red October? No, is that the one I'm thinking of?
It's got Sean Connery in it. But...
It's got Sean Connery, and is it Alec Baldwin? Alec Baldwin, I think, plays Jack Ryan, or am I like mixing?
Tom Cruise, maybe?
No. It's
no, he's in the Mission Impossible movie.
Yeah. Unless he played Jack Ryan in a different movie, but I think there were a few movies with different Jack Ryans, and so
never trust a guy with two first names.
All right, now I want to look up The Hunt for Red October. I remember. Did you ever see that?
No, I never.
I remember watching it. Yeah, Alec Baldwin. I remember watching it and enjoying it, although I don't know what to make of it. And now thinking about it. Jack Ryan. Alec Baldwin played Jack Ryan in The Hunt for Red October.
Cool.
So I won't look up any more Jack Ryan movies. Now I'm curious to see that movie again.
Yeah,
and Tim Curry has a role in it.
Oh yeah, I've never
Curry plays
seen
the
like
doctor.
the extent of my knowledge about that. There's like a submarine in it somewhere. I didn't even know Alec Baldwin was in it.
Mm-hmm.
And my only memory of that movie is in Ghost World by Daniel Close, the graphic novel.
Uh-huh.
There's a point where one of them walks into an adult video store, and the only legible title on the shelf is called "The Cunt for Red October."
Oh, that's great. It's awful and it's great.
I mean, it fits the scene really well. It's it gets that like grimy 90s
I thought you were going to say
slacker
Nadine.
world thing. Nadine.
Nadine, do you know what Nadine is?
Nadine, like from Twin Peaks.
No, it was Alec Baldwin and Kim Basinger back when they were married.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
long time ago.
Now I have to go check that because I'm sure I've got that wrong. I've got everybody in that movie wrong. It wasn't Alec Baldwin. It wasn't Kim Basinger. They were never an item.
No, Alec Baldwin and Kim Basinger were definitely married at some point. I know that.
Oh, okay. Although now I'm looking up Nadine. It's there we go. There's a movie we should watch.
Nadine.
There's a forgotten classic. Let's see. Oh, Jeff Bridges. Sorry, it was Rip Torn.
Rip Torn's
Jerry
in it?
Stiller. Yeah,
I'll watch anything with Rip Torn. Yeah.
yeah. Rip Torn was awesome.
Rip Torn's a man.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, it was Jeff Daniels. But I think it's when Alec Baldwin and Kim Basinger were together. Yeah. I remember the preview for it. Anyways, yeah, what else can we say?
Yeah, I don't know how much.
I mean, the movie was at the end of the day, it was really straightforward. It takes it just
There were a
brings up
couple-
more and more like the first there's questioning or what exactly was going on, and the further it goes along, it's the further the more and more clear it is that the U.S. is complicit in the coup. One of the State Department people even says something to Jack Lemmon about how part of this, you're talking about all the capitalism, that there's 3,000 American companies that have interests there, so that's just one of the reasons to support this. And he himself, he's a businessman, so he's not a political, he's not really into politics, or at least that we're aware
he's
of.
got that like entrepreneur right wing kind of thing of like, this country worked for me, I'm doing good, and
Right. He doesn't believe that the
I need
US...
to believe in the system because the system's been good to me.
Yeah. And eventually he goes on to sue multiple people in government, including Henry Kissinger.
Yeah.
He loses the suit.
But he
All
loses the suit because the State Department will not redact any of the information necessary to make to have a trial, basically.
Yeah.
So the State Department just was sort of like, kind of like what's happening now. Where it's like, you can't have witnesses, you can't have evidence, you can't have...
The movie came out in 1982, and they already had that answer, so let's see. So to going back. So we're talking about 40 years.
Well, yeah, the coup was in 1973, so
Right.
so that would have been...
And it took a while
would
for
have
the
happened
lawsuit.
9 years before the movie came out.
Right, but then the
so-
lawsuits they dragged on. They took a while before they got thrown out. That was the
Yeah.
impression I got. So, but yeah. So
Yeah, I
we're
mean,
talking
8
about more than
years-
40 years.
Honestly, 8 years isn't that long for a lawsuit to drag on
No,
if it's
no.
like a really complicated lawsuit.
No, but we're still talking in the order of years, not months.
Right.
But anyway, the point is that it's been 40 years. Do you think since then any of this information has been redacted or released, or are we still at the same position we were then?
If we look up, because we have the guy's name, there's the book that's out there. The best way to find relevant information about topics like that in the like CIA and FBI vault pages online is like Charles Homan.
Charles Harmon, I think. No.
Okay, yeah, Charles Harmon.
No, Holman.
Holman.
I think you're right. Holman.
Holman, yeah.
Harmon. Wait, it's on the back. It's on the back, right?
No, it doesn't have their...
Oh, okay.
Wait, no, okay, Charles Horman, yeah, it's right there on the
okay.
back.
So somebody mishears it as Horseman.
If you look up his name, you might get a thing or two. You'd probably get results related to the lawsuit, and you'd probably just see a lot of black pages and then letters from the guy's dad.
Yeah.
Or like form letters from the government. If you start looking through the Operation Condor files, and you start looking up, I mean, honestly, there's probably not a lot of useful research names that were like specifically in this movie. I think you'd have to go to the book and kind of. The other thing is that like a lot of the U.S. government people that weren't like employees of the consulate at that point, or direct employees of the consulate, I guess you'd say. They could have been going under pseudonyms. They could. You can search the stuff by like, if it's not redacted text, you can just search it's like OCR'd, so you can. So if you were gonna look around for more stuff on that, there's probably just like, I mean, I'm sure there's like a ton of files on all this, but there's also probably one big master file on the Allende coup.
Oh, start just Googling it. We could just go Google it and see what's out there. I mean, there'll be sure plenty of people saying this happened, but they could also direct us to what's happened since then regarding all these blacked out files, even if that.
Yeah, and I mean, once the stuff's redacted, it doesn't tend to get unredacted later.
Yeah.
Or I get like some things get unredacted. I mean, the fact that they've been stalling so much on unredacting the Kennedy stuff seems kind of weird to me. So who knows? I mean, I think that was like a mob thing, probably, but
the assassination.
Yeah.
All right, that's a topic for another episode.
That's a whole other.
Yeah. And we have plenty to go by that.
There's a lot of JFK movies.
Yeah,
including JFK.
That didn't make sense when I said to go by that. What I mentioned was, to go over that to discuss that. So, but yeah, so just about this movie, I was surprised at how short it felt. It was 2 hours, and a pretty heavy topic. And like, wow, blown away by it. And at the same time, it was kind of a breeze.
And especially given the quality of the. So when we're watching this Laserdisc, and the Laserdisc player is in good shape, it's working fine, and played other stuff on it, and the sound video and everything comes through fine. With this one, and I mean, obviously I'm describing this to the listeners because you were there, but I think there's disc rot on it or something, because as the first side progressed, there was this sound like film spinning or like a helicopter whirring nearby that got progressively louder and then abruptly ended when we got to side 2 of the Laserdisc.
Yeah, side 2 was fine.
And it wasn't that horrible at the beginning of side 1, but then by the end of it, like, I couldn't tell what anybody was saying. It was like, it was annoying.
My friend.
Well, do you mind?
No, that's it.
Thanks. What did you say your name was again?
Well, I didn't say, Charles, but my name's Andrew Beckett.
Andrew? Nice to meet you. Thanks a lot. You a jurist?
No, not exactly.
What are you doing down here?
Well, the Navy sent me down here to do a job, and
And you tried to make some adjustments to the
I was
to the
trying
audio.
to fix it on the.
Can you explain what disc rot is?
Oh, so disc rot, this could happen to your CDs, this could happen to your DVDs, this could even happen to your laser discs if you're the other guy that got the rest of the laser discs. But
Dan has most of them.
No, I have. There's like Laserdisc subreddits where there's people where their entire basement they've just like given it over to fucking, like, I don't know why. I could never get
Why people would get rid of them?
No, I totally get why people would get rid of them, but like I couldn't imagine in 2020 owning like 3,000 Laserdiscs and that being my primary movie collection.
Well, you know why? Because then you get to be the person who has 3,000 Laserdiscs. You get to be known as that guy.
I mean, I only hang on to ones where it's something that's uncommon that I couldn't find somewhere else, or.
When I say that guy, I mean that guy in the gender neutral sense. Maybe I should say that person. I said person at the beginning of that, and then I ended up with guy.
I don't know. I feel like there's not a lot of women on these
on Reddit.
Well, A, on Reddit, B, on like old media playback device crap forums. Like, it seems to be pretty dude centric. Like, would it be nice if that changed? Sure, but
probably not with Laserdiscs.
Yeah, for the moment, it seems like the hi-fi nerding out shit is it's lopsided.
Up to now, I think the only person I ever knew who owned a Laserdisc was a woman.
Really?
That I went to college with.
But that was back when it was like a thing people would actually use. Right.
Yeah, right. It's not the big collectors now. And by the way, just what I said about Reddit in general not having many women on it. I'm actually curious what the gender distribution is on Reddit and demographics in general, racial, etc. But yeah, I'm curious. I'm sure it depends on the subreddit and the different kinds of categories.
For sure.
The balance between the two is more balanced, or tilts the other way. I'm just curious. And there's Reddit alternatives that have that are curated, or not curated, but are better moderated, where people kind of let it be, but when stuff gets out of control or really like offensive or harmful, they'll stop it. I don't know how much of that happens on Reddit.
Reddit, it really depends thread to thread,
or subreddit to subreddit.
Subreddit to subreddit. What do the people who own the place or running the place at that point in time feel like doing? Because there was that whole like giant shit show when Elaine Chao fired some person who was helping out with r/AMA. But I just realized I never explained what Discrot was.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's let's get back to that.
So Discrot.
Forget Reddit.
So CD, DVD, Laserdisc, in terms of physical materials, they're all the same thing. You got 2 thick slabs of plastic, relatively thick slabs of plastic, an incredibly thin piece of foil. That's where all your video and audio and whatnot is. And they're kind of just, you got your foil smashed together between 2 hard pieces of plastic. And over time, depending on how the disc was manufactured, the foil will start separating from the hard pieces of plastic, and you start getting some wild and crazy visual and audio effects.
Perhaps something that sounds like,
which is really weird because I've never gotten that with a disc rot issue before. Like, usually if there's disc rot, like, because some of those have a little bit of disc rot, but on a laser disc, what it usually looks like is just kind of like lines across the screen, like kind of fuzzy little lines, or like a part of the picture will look like a fuzzy black spot because it can't read it. With this, it was just like a fucking... I feel like it kind of added a little bit to the beginning of the movie because like it felt like we were in a war zone. There was a fucking like helicopter next to our heads.
Yeah.
For like 30 minutes just because of the laser disc player.
This was like Apocalypse Now over and over again.
That was my Vietnam.
Yeah. I got the sound wrong, by the way. It was...
Yeah, and it just got so loud.
Here, let's try that. You talk while I do it.
Or hell, I could just put the laser disc on. We could record it and put it in the episode.
Bonus feature.
Yeah, bonus feature. We can splice that, and I'll run over there with the mic in a sec, and we'll play back a little bit of it for all you lovely ladies and gents and animals and anybody who's not a baby out there listening. Beings. The baby is like, fuck off. But
babies are persona non grata to you. All right. So missing. Any final thoughts?
No, I think we've
covered everything. Lots about history.
Do you have any final thoughts?
No, I think not really. I think it was all I won't say summed up. I think we've covered it all. It only took us close to almost as long as the movie, which is better than some of our episodes in which the episode is longer than the movie.
Well, this is one of our few episodes I think where the episode is shorter than the movie. Our original recording of the episode pre-cuts is longer than the movie.
Right.
Because I think some of them, after you edited the podcast, they became shorter.
Yes, that's true. This one, we're starting to get close. We're closing in on the full length of the movie.
I also think this is a longer movie than we've watched before, generally speaking.
Yeah, most of them are definitely under 2 hours. I think we've had a couple longer ones. The Batman movie was actually longer than 2 hours, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, it was like
surprisingly.
2 hours. It was longer than I remembered it being.
Yeah.
So I guess we will sign off, and hopefully you're enjoying this new audio file.
Yeah.
Microphoneage that we're like jamming in your ear.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. Talking on the mics this way, and also now that we've realized that we can have karaoke night.
Yep.
including duets.
Karaoke playing. Karaoke.
Yeah, woohoo, karaoke.
Maybe if we have like a fundraiser for the show at some point, we can do
Charge $10 a head.
$10 a head. Yeah, like have like a rant party.
Yeah. Okay. Wow, that sounds good. Wow. If all our
What
listeners,
kind of
or even a
themed
subset,
drink would we make for like what mixture of alcohol and like sugary liquids represents?
a virgin dry vermouth.
And on that note, see you
Oh,
next week.
Well, I just want to give out one more shout to Mr. Buford, one of the greatest history teachers, one of the greatest school teachers, who happens to also be a football coach out there. And I haven't looked
He
him
might
up.
be the coach, but he's the real MVP.
Yeah. Ooh, nice. So yeah, I'm sorry you were doing the sign off.
Oh yeah. So goodbye.
All right, take care, everyone. This is the real sign off. Bye, everyone.